Elden Ring, the long-awaited game of legend, has finally arrived in our filthy, tarnished hands. Selling over 12 million copies in just its first couple of weeks, fans new and old are journeying into the lands between, and boy oh boy are they in for a surprise. Elden Ring is most definitely the largest, most expansive, and monstrous world I've ever ventured across in a video game. Each play session is filled with new surprises, new environments, new weapons, and at the point of writing this, I've beaten this game at just over 100 hours, and still, there's no end in sight. I have drenched and bathed myself in the grotesque, grim, but often beautiful world of the lands between. I've scoured each and every corner and cave I come across, and somehow, I still feel like I've missed plenty of potential loot, or bosses hidden in the shadows, or even in some cases, behind invisible walls. As a relative newcomer that has never beaten or even played more than 20 hours in one of these games, I'm finding myself fascinated and obsessed with this open-world iteration of FromSoft's iconic Souls design. So arise now, ye tarnished. For the call of long-lost grace speaks to us all.
Speaks to us all.
And it is time to finally discuss Elden Ring. Elden Ring was a massive promise, even from the moment it was announced at E3 2019. With its immediate predecessor being Sekiro, a departure from the usual Souls-like style, fans of From Software were eager to see the studio's next adventure. With Elden Ring being revealed as an open-world game as well, many were curious how the genre would evolve. Though I haven't had much experience to Souls prior to Elden Ring, I'll be the first, or more realistically, perhaps the 12 millionth person to tell you that Dark Souls has had a stronger grasp on the tone and influence of gaming in the last decade than anything that's come out in that time period. The relevance of the phrase, it's like Dark Souls, in regards to the difficulty of any game that's come out in the last decade can show you that. Even more so, games like Nioh and The Surge are a reflection of how its game design can be iterated upon and given new life in other forms. The monumental challenge on From Software to evolve their design further for an open world setting is something I can't even wrap my head around. With the growing popularity of Souls-like games being at a level unheard of before, Elden Ring not only had to evolve Dark Souls, they had to evolve gaming just as they did before. After what felt like countless delays, we are finally here. And I'm happy to tell you that Elden Ring is a phenomenal step forward, not only for Souls games, but for open world games in general. Being a relative newcomer to FromSoft games, having only made real tangible progress in Sekiro, I wasn't one of the legion awaiting this massive title. I had only decided to actually purchase and play the game about a month before its release. And on February 25th, 2022, I thought to dip my toe into Elden Ring before going back to Horizon Forbidden West, which had released a week prior. But when I started it up, I fell in and drowned in it, and I haven't come back up. 100 hours of traversing the lands between has provided an experience like no other game I've played before. No matter what direction I go in, I'm sure to stumble into something that either makes me ecstatic I found it, or petrified in fear as I realize I've made a huge mistake. Though succeeding in said mistake presents a reward as well. I started out wondering where to go, but after a while you realize Elden Ring just wants you to go. Where? Who the fuck knows? All you got is your flask, your horse, your sword, and the dreadful feeling of potential death. I discover a cave hidden deep in the shadows and go on a short adventure knowing at the end, I'll most likely find a reward worth the trouble. And even if I didn't find any use for the reward I found, the satisfaction I got out of completing this dungeon I could have easily missed was rewarding enough. In a gaming landscape where many are affected by open world fatigue, where standard open world, checklist objective styled, icon filled maps are getting even more tiring by the year to traverse, it's not only a breath of fresh air, it's a breath of life from the dead horse we've been beating for so long. Unlike the vast majority of digital landscapes, where completing the icons on your map simply grants you some XP and maybe an item, every activity you run into in Elden Ring feels challenging yet rewarding. Whether it's one of the many weapons scattered about the lands between, an armor set, or even just the runes you earn through aimless adventuring, you're guaranteed to be rewarded with something at least somewhat useful by the end of it. You're encouraged to do what feels natural to you by being so open and explorable, but also by being worth your time no matter where you go. It's an amazing ask for a map this large that doesn't offer you much guidance in terms of where to go next. Its world design is also a massive part of what makes adventuring such a joy. The dramatic and incredibly stylized way the land is structured even adds to this. Working with the lore of the story, there's huge parts of the world that are destroyed, but even in their destruction is the opportunity to explore and discover. Many times upon entering a new area, I notice a huge obstruction in the land thinking, wow, that looks fucking incredible. Only then for me to be walking along the obstruction later. Whether it be walking along the gigantic staff sticking out of a crater in the royal city, or walking along the branches weaving in and out of structures in Miquella's Haligtree. It was a trick that worked on me every single time. It also greatly helped in distinguishing areas from each other. From the land's rolling hills and its opening Limgrave area, to the cavernous jagged cliffsides of Liurnia, to the eerie red skies of Caelid. No two areas of this enormous world look or feel the same, each with secrets to discover, dungeons to explore, and their own unique enemy types to fight. It's extremely meticulous in its world design and enemy placement throughout every inch of this massive map. Its mysterious yet distinctive world also lends to the most primed water cooler topic video game. There's a few coworkers I check in with from time to time to hear their progress, and every single time there's a mention of an enemy, an area, a weapon, an armor set, or a boss that leads either me or them to go, what the fuck, I'm 100 hours in, where even is that? It's a world that's so mysterious but welcoming of exploration that it's not just a well-designed world, it's a thoughtfully designed one. Each piece of the geography feels like it's there for a reason. Each doorway, each rock formation, each winding path, whether to obscure a hidden cave or to surprise you with an enemy around the corner, this open world is purposeful and filled with things to discover. This aspect also adds greatly to the community feel of these games, now more than ever. If everyone's experience was secluded, we'd all be playing this game for an eternity trying to figure out quest lines or hidden areas. If this game was released pre-internet, we'd be fucked trying to figure out this world's most obscure secrets. This is every you must defeat Shenlong to stand a chance video game rumor turned real. Which is why the community aspect of this game is such a monumental deal. You have to genuinely trust and become a part of the Soulsborne community to obtain an inkling of information about this single-player video game. Since I'm newer to these games than most, I've never experienced the kind of community that the Souls games have garnered. While sure, the tips someone could give you about a game like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta could potentially help you become more confident in their gameplay, help and information for Elden Ring is deathly vital to experience the breadth of what it has to offer. With the prominence of invisible walls in FromSoft games, you could miss out on entire bosses and sections of the map without the help of a guide or the flimsy believability of a shining white message on the ground stating hidden wall ahead. You could also be missing nothing as you walk into another message that reads, liar ahead. Maybe you've discovered something useful on your own. You could leave your own message lending a helping hand to a fellow Tarnished, then later be in the heat of battle, low on health, and get a pleasant surprise via health refill as a notification alerts you that your message was appraised. The community is not only a fantastic help, but an almost tangible cooperative party that only becomes tangible once you summon one for co-op. This experience holds a special place in my heart, not just for the incredible time playing it, but also for the time I got extremely frustrated with an obnoxious ranged enemy, then upon finally killing him, I read a message on the ground that just read, revenge. And I was reminded that we really are all in this journey together. Now I can't continue this review without discussing just how ball-punchingly, throat-slittingly, controller-shatteringly difficult this goddamn game is. Not sure if you've heard, but these games are meant to be hardcore for hardcore gamers. You open this game and after your very first interaction with an NPC that feels the need to point out your unfortunate dry spell.
Unfortunately for you, however, you are maidenless.
Why nobody's there for me? What more do you want from me?
Your first enemy is a man on horseback ready to kick you in the goddamn teeth for daring to step off that porch. In the span of its opening couple of weeks, less than half of players on Steam had beaten the game's first major boss. While every FromSoft game is well known for its difficulty, this may be their most unrelenting and unforgiving yet in terms of enemy combat design. Though this time around you're encouraged to use all of the tools at your disposal, mainly being summons, magic, ashes of war, or just leaving a boss to gain experience in the field and come back drastically more powerful than before, you'll still have to learn the mechanics and unironically, get good to claw your way through. Some of you may hear this and be like,
I beat the Ruby weapon in Final Fantasy VII, dude. I'm not fucking scared.
You should be. To further emphasize my point, let me get into spoilers for just a moment to tell you about my exorbitantly long, exhausting battle with one of the game's optional bosses.
I am Melania, Blade of Miquella. And I have never known defeat.
If you've played this game, you share my pain when I tell you how many hours it took for me to beat Melania, the goddess of rot. I fought her for 13 frustrated and distraught hours, and by the end, I was just glad to never have to fight her again as long as I live. 13 hours? Why? I went into the fight expecting it to be strenuous, of course, but after defeating most of the enemies in the big treehouse that is her area, my confidence in my ability was probably much higher than appropriate. She beat all of that right out of me in the first hour or so. I didn't come anywhere close to even depleting her first health bar. This is mostly because this woman is the greatest sword fighter I've ever fought in a video game in my life. But also, guess what happens when she does damage to you when her health isn't at 100%?
What?
She takes it back from you. She takes the health back from you. For almost every fight, I also use summons, and guess what? Guess what?
What?
She stole health from them as well, making this fight much more difficult than just your average Souls asshole. When I arrived to fight her, I spent about 4 hours fighting and dying over and over before deciding, fuck this, I'm going to achieve this by nefarious means. Throughout the entirety of my 100-hour journey, I never spent this excessively long on any one boss, so I was determined. I wanted to put her on a white tee. I wanted to be smoking that goddess of rot pack, but I knew my current build with my heavy, slow pizza cutter wasn't going to cut it. I opted to choose one of the more overpowered builds that the game offers since you're so freely able to respec your character into whatever you want. So I fast traveled back to Raya Lucaria to spend a larval tier and get back to business. Little did I know, this particular build, called Rivers of Blood, had been nerfed into somewhat of a Puddle of Blood build. I fought her for 9 more hours after this. Difficulty has been a widely debated topic in the gaming space, and From Software games are the focal point and somehow main argument for both adding easy modes or accessibility options to high difficulty games, and why games should have their own creative expression through how difficult they are and the experience of struggle being thematic to the experience. It's hard not to say that in those 13 hours fighting this boss that I screamed to the heavens for some kind of respite, I died hundreds and hundreds of times, each one feeling like they're accelerating my real life departure. I start out doing well, making efficient progress on her health bar, only for her to levitate into the air, preparing my least favorite of her moveset, a flurry of slashes that feel impossible to escape once you're in it. I fought and I fought, and this move, above all else, ended my attempts upwards of 80% of the time. Sometimes she would even do it 2 to 3 times in a row, catching me completely off guard and unprepared for it. This is undoubtedly the most difficult opponent I've ever faced in my life. Even with how hopeless it would feel not even getting to her second phase sometimes, I knew that it was possible. This is where I began to understand why these games are this extremely difficult. Here I am, clashing blades with Melania, a literal demigod in this game's lore. Of course she hasn't known defeat being this goddamn powerful, but here I was, dodging quite a few of her attacks at times, staggering her, being determined enough to learn her patterns as I go, and still fighting. At no point from hour 1 to 13 did I think to just give up. I did say, quote, "this is bullshit" multiple times, but who wouldn't? I fought like my life depended on it, and eventually, after hours and hours, I struggled forward into an eventual victory. And with it, came the waterfall of relief that I would never in my life have to face this woman in combat ever again. I sat in the battlefield quieted by my victory and thought to myself, did that need to be that hard? Would I recommend someone having the experience I just did? And of course I would say, absolutely. There's no better video game related feeling to me than becoming proficient in difficult games and overcoming the hardest of challenges. But then again, that's me. The anticipation and release of this game sparked mass interest in it, and with it came nationwide FOMO from folks not usually keen on FromSoft games, or sometimes even games in general. People that could usually tune out talk of a new Soulsborne game had their ears and timelines flooded with Elden Ring talk. And of course, many bought in, interested in the current hot new thing. What many weren't expecting was possibly From Software's most difficult and vaguest video game they've ever made. This led many to question the reasoning of its difficulty, and further to question the game's design as a whole. I saw someone state that the game was poorly designed because you could become over-leveled and return to lower-level areas and slaughter everything there, even though that's the point of the ability to do so in the first place. That's why they allow you to do that. If you get stuck in an arduous fight you don't think you'll win anytime soon, yeah, no shit, you can leave, get stronger, and come back. That's the point of being able to leave at all. My point is that many people bought this game expecting to inherently have a good time because they saw other people doing so. But this game is not at all for everyone. Obviously, no game is, and they shouldn't be. If you can't imagine yourself enjoying the process of throwing yourself at a boss over and over to learn their patterns over time and eventually, hopefully, defeat them, just to have that process happen repeatedly over hundreds of hours of playtime while taking breaks to explore a gorgeous landscape, then this game may not be for you. And that's okay. Games you don't like can still exist. This is a person-to-person experience. I enjoyed it despite not finishing any of these before, and you might have an entirely different experience, one where you may not beat Malenia. Who knows? As far as accessibility goes though, absolutely add any accessibility options you can think of to every game that exists. Easy modes too, it doesn't affect me a single bit, and if anyone that's not disabled disagrees with this, tell them they can eat a dick. Elden Ring will be remembered as a landmark in gaming history, like Breath of the Wild before it, and Ocarina of Time before that. It's evolved a popular format that's been stale for way too long and hopefully inspires a wave of future open world games that aren't afraid to let you discover what they have to offer instead of directing you to it. It was assumed that Breath of the Wild would be the game to change open worlds forever, but thus far, it's mostly resulted in huge open worlds with lots of grass. Here's to more open world games free of hand-holding and cluttered UIs. And above all else, here's to more open world games that are legitimately worth your time.